Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, and we're headed into our final segment of the day where just a little bit of a, fun, a little bit of a ridiculous exercise as we are still months away from the beginning of the regular season, but building up on that NFL hype, wanted to make a little bit of a tier system for the different NFL teams. So without further ado, I guess we'll just dive right into it. The tier 1, I have the true Super Bowl contenders, and I have the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the 49ers. Really shouldn't be any surprise here. It sort of seems like during the offseason, some people have soured on the 49ers a little bit. Now, I still think that this year they do have a clear chance to sort of run this back. I think that the NFC is much weaker than the AFC, and they have the best roster potentially in the league, but definitely in their conference. They're 1 year away, I would say, from having maybe not a financial crisis, but having to deal with a lot of starting to actually balance all of the big time players that they have under contract. Now, I expect the Brandon Ayuk conversation has definitely dominated a lot of the NFL offseason. I think he's going to be back next year. They're going to have 3 legitimate wide receiver weapons in Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and their first-round draft pick in Ricky Pearsall, who was one of my favorite wide receivers coming into the draft. So all of those weapons still. George Kittle, of course, and Brock Purdy with another year under his belt, another year removed from that elbow injury where, he made a miraculous recovery, really, to be ready for week 1 of last year like he was, and now I think that he is going to be sort of fully healthy coming into the year, so I expect big things out of him. And then the Chiefs and the Ravens shouldn't be too much of a surprise either. I thought that the Chiefs got better over the offseason, did lose some sort of supplemental pieces, but the key for them, as long as they have Patrick Mahomes, and as long as some of we've seen the distractions around some of their players that have come out during the course of the offseason, but assuming that Rashee Rice is actually there, they just drafted Xavier Worthy as well. I think I saw this morning that his car was stolen, so there's a whole lot of nonsense going on with the Chiefs, but as long as Patrick Mahomes is there, I have full faith in them. And then the Ravens as well, where they lose Patrick Queen. That was their biggest loss during the offseason, but they still have playmakers on each of the 3 levels of that defense. Lamar Jackson is still going to be an MVP candidate, and hopefully we see a little bit more of a developed wide receiver core, but we'll see about that. The second tier I have here are playoff teams with a chance for more. I have the Lions, Bengals, Bills. I did include the Cowboys and Eagles in this tier. I don't feel necessarily great about either one of them. They should make the playoffs. I would be surprised if they don't make the playoffs. And from a roster perspective, I know how much of a mess the Eagles were down the stretch of the regular season, but they bring in 2 new coordinators. I think upgrades on both sides of the ball. They did a really good job, I thought, of addressing the needs that they had in free agency, where Saquon Barkley, do I think they overpaid for him a little bit? Possibly, but definitely an upgrade over DeAndre Swift. That run game had definitely fallen off throughout the course of the season. I thought they did a good job to address their secondary as well, especially going into the draft with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. So I think that the Eagles should be back. The Cowboys, I don't think we're ever a total mess. And, even if you are the biggest Cowboys hater in the world, we've seen them at least make the playoffs and make the second round as well. But that's why, again, confidence level isn't sky high with them, but there is a chance for more with them. And I feel like they are in the same category where every one of these teams has some questions sort of surrounding them. The Bills with a lot of their offseason losses, but you have to believe in Josh Allen, I think. And I do feel like to some degree the Bills' losses were maybe even slightly overstated, but we'll see about that. But third tier, I have confident in their playoff contention. I have the Packers, the Dolphins. I have the Bears, surprisingly enough, and the Falcons. Now, the Falcons, I feel confident in them potentially being a playoff team because the NFC South is so short. But I don't know. I felt weird having the Bears on a tier above them. I think that I'm maybe buying into the hype a little bit much with the Bears, but I do think there are a lot of positive signs with them. We've talked at length about the defense that they played down the stretch of the season to win a handful of these games, and now they have an upgraded quarterback. They have an improved wide receiver situation. The offensive line, I mean, it can be a little bit shaky at times, but a younger group that is hopefully going to develop a little bit more. I think the Bears are going to be legitimately good this year, so I think that they're definitely going to be in the playoff picture. This one, I have sort of a seesaw tier where it could make the playoffs, could be a second round exit, but I would also not be surprised if they do not make it. This is maybe where I probably should have put the Falcons, but let me know what you think. I have the Jets, the Browns, the Jaguars, the Rams, where I definitely think that these teams could be in a position where they could win a postseason game, but there are a lot of real concerns, I think, with this group where, things could go wrong. If you want to go with the Rams, who I feel like I've been a huge fan of for the past handful of years, I think that the Matt Stafford conversation sort of surrounding this is, at any point, if he gets injured, that team falls apart. Losing Raheem Morris could definitely be a really big deal for them. And the Jets are another situation where, ideally you think that their ceiling is high enough, but Aaron Rodgers, are you going to... Obviously, I don't think that anybody's expecting a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers to be his MVP version of himself, but what kind of production can you get from the position? And I will say, as I look back at my notes here, I did realize that I forgot about the Texans, where they would be in a playoff team with a chance for more, for me at least. And then I have a little bit of a middle ground tier here, where I have the Indianapolis Colts, I have the LA Chargers, Pittsburgh Steelers, Seattle Seahawks, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I probably put the Cardinals in that tier as well, but I'm not super confident in them. This is just a group of teams where they're never going to be an easy out, I think, necessarily for another team, but I would be more surprised than not if they were to make the playoffs out of this group. I mean, I would probably honestly lean with the Colts as the team that could maybe sort of cause the most damage if Anthony Richardson comes back and is an effective version of himself. But, I just feel like this tier as a whole of teams is pretty mediocre, and it's not always the worst thing in the world to be mediocre in the NFL, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not a believer in the Steelers. I know that a lot of people are. I feel like they can still win 9 games this season, but I would be legitimately surprised if they were to win a playoff game, I think. Next tier here would probably consist of the Raiders, the Vikings, the Titans, the Commanders, and the Giants would be somewhere in that middle ground, but I'm not a believer in Daniel Jones. I also don't think that that was the wrong decision for them to not try and reach for a quarterback while they still have all of these other holes. I just think that the Giants are a little bit of a work in progress here, and they are maybe a year or so away, but offensive line is a mess there, and now they don't even have their best playmaker from last year in running back. I like Neighbors a lot. I've heard a lot of people talking about the idea of him winning Rookie of the Year. Is Daniel Jones going to help him generate enough stats to do so? Let me know what you think. And then I guess I would probably group the last group here of the Giants, the Broncos, the Patriots, and the Panthers at the very bottom, where these are all teams that, like I said, just have a ways to go before they can necessarily be one of the top teams. We've seen with all of these teams, other than, I guess, Dable and the Giants sort of make, and even that was only a couple years ago, a lot of head coaching changes, a lot of work to do for all of these teams. But let me know what you think on my list here. This was a little bit of a freestyled how I would group these teams together, but that is all we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. We're live every 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, and we will be back tomorrow. Remember to like, follow, subscribe. Check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna